Alright, so this is going to be a new kind of video, and the first of a series, and I guess I'm calling it Dear Liberals, where I use some of the insights of my many years of study and research in order to explain some things for, you can call them leftists, you can call them liberals. In any case, they're a population in the West that needs to know some of these things. Well, in any case, let's try and answer this question. So, in the 2024 election and also in the 2020 election, a lot of Latinx voted for Donald Trump. They not only voted for Donald Trump, but they were also fervent believers in QAnon. QAnon was really big, apparently, on what was it called again? WhatsApp, right? Which is like a sort of a Mexican app in the American South and Southwest. And so a lot of Latinx voted for Donald Trump. In particular, in Texas, this was actually a thing that concerned a lot of Democrat strategists, that 10 years of Democrats slowly gaining on Republicans in Texas was wiped out in a single election in 2024. So let's look at the ideological reasons why this took place. Something that I think liberals don't really understand about Latin people in America, about the Latinx, about Hispanics, is that Hispanics like authoritarianism. Hispanic men dislike feminism. They especially hate white women. And the third thing is that Hispanics are becoming converted not only to Protestant Christianity, but to a very specific type of Protestant Christianity, which is intimately linked to the Trump phenomenon, and not necessarily traditional evangelical or even mainline Protestant Christianity. So let's address the first thing. One of the earliest memes I have on my computer, which is from around 2016 or 15, is Donald Trump wearing the uniform of Augusto Pinochet, and is described in this meme in Spanish as El Caudillo Yankee, right? The Yankee caudillo. And caudillo it's one of those loaded terms in Hispanophone politics. Initially, it referred to Francisco Franco in Spain, who was a military dictator, obviously. But then it grew to cover basically any sort of authoritarian, vaguely right-wing rule in Spanish America, primarily, even when Spain long dispensed with the Franco regime. And this was not made by someone who criticized Donald Trump. This was made by someone who supported Donald Trump. This was a pro-Trump meme. And, initially I thought it was really funny, but then you slowly start realizing, hold on a second, Hispanics, they don't really have a lot of democratic capacity. They don't, if you try and engage with them in conversation over the internet, they do not engage in discourse. They do not argue. They do not use arguments. They use appeals not even to emotion, but to strength. One of the favorite tactics, for example, of the Groypers, which are, pro-Trump Hispanics led by Nick Fuentes, is to dogpile you. If you disagree with them on Twitter, they're going to arrive in massive numbers. Like, there's going to be hundreds of these mooks in your replies, and when you inevitably block them or call attention to the fact that you've been basically targeted for a harassment campaign, they declare victory. Because, 100 men dogpiling a single dude, that's considered a victory in their world. And this is the kind of thing they like. They do not really think about politics in a sophisticated way, but they think of it as just pure power relations. There's 100 of us, and there's one of you, therefore we are right. This is not a very Western way of thinking. It's a very, I don't want to say Eastern, because they're not from the East, but it's a very alien, racially alien way of thinking, even for white liberals, who are going to try and argue with you. They're going to try and argue with you on moral grounds, maybe on emotional grounds, but they're not going to try and dogpile you. And so this sort of authoritarian strongman who simply brushes away opposition, that is very much in line in the way Latinx societies are structured. Hence, the rise of El Caudillo Yankee, Donald Trump. Okay, let's look at the second reason. The second reason is these people object to the rise of feminism. If you look at the state of women's rights in Latin America, and not even so much of women's rights as male-female relations. Now, it is very common for Latinx and Hispanic men in Latin America to kill their wives over perceived or actual infidelity. Wife murder, uxoricide, is actually very common. Likewise, and this is something people don't tell you, like if they sort of try believing the trad Latina psyop, is that Hispanic women, Latinx women, are far likelier to cheat on their husbands or boyfriends than white women. This is because of the way that different peoples handle their morality. For the vast majority of the world, morality is external. It boils down to shame, right? You do the moral thing because you're shamed, and if you can get away with it, well, you can get away with it. Whereas white people, we handle morality by means of guilt. So we do not judge our acts, moral or immoral, against the reaction of the community so much as we judge them against, well, what Sigmund Freud called the superego, the moral construct within our own heads. And if we go against this moral construct, this superego, this Freudian superego, then we feel guilt, and this guilt eats away at us from the inside, and so we are often driven to confess. And of course, in anticipation of avoiding the pain of guilt, we actually don't do the wrong thing. And that is how white people handle morality. But since Hispanics don't really think like that, first of all, Latinx women are likelier to cheat on their husbands and boyfriends. They're likelier to doing more often, especially if they can get away with it. And Latinx men then have to take more drastic steps to address this sort of infidelity, which includes treating women like property, beating them, killing them, chaining them to radiators. So you have the Muslim thing, where basically women cannot go outside the house without wearing a trash can covering. Well, that is, of course, clashing with the societal, cultural, and legal expectations of a society like the United States. And this is creating a bit of a problem, especially if you're trying to get these people to think of themselves as Americans. So they observe the behavior of white women, white American women, which is appropriate for a white society, but inappropriate for a Latinx society, for a Hispanic society, and so they conclude that feminism has gone out of hand. Now, feminism may have gone out of hand for domestic reasons within the West itself, but we are really concerned with the reaction of Hispanics and Latinx here more generally, not really to what feminists are doing. And this feeds into these sort of, let's call them lower sexual value men, like J.D. Vance, who project this extreme divorced dad energy and who blame their own failures as men on feminism, hence leading to intensification of gender-based identity politics, which bring a whole host of Hispanic votes for the Republican, not even for the Republican Party, but for the Trump phenomenon. I gotta get off this busy street. I can hardly hear myself think. This is, cars are the devil, I gotta say. Anyways, where was I going with this? And the third aspect, it's probably the weakest aspect at the moment, but it's going to become more relevant as time goes by. There is this thing called New Thought, or you may know of it as prosperity gospel. And it's this idea that if you are rich, it is because God has blessed you with wealth, and that subsequently rich people are morally better than poor people because God has singled them out for wealth. Now, it's related to Trump through his own pastor for many years. I think it was Norman Vincent Peale, who is an adherent of this prosperity gospel through New Thought. This essence that this belief that if you direct your will, your mind towards something, you will get it. It's called the power of positive visualization. And it's also a heresy, as opposed to traditional Christianity, or even evangelical Christianity. It has been condemned by both mainline and evangelical Protestant leaders, condemned by Catholic leaders. So it's not not a very Christian idea. This idea that, rich people are morally superior to poor people, but it appeals to materialistic people. Now, that includes Donald Trump. That includes a lot of white Americans, unfortunately, because culture has been degrading in the West, but it also appeals greatly to Hispanics, especially, because it gives them this idea. They can sort of buy into being American. They can sort of buy into being white. And for a lot of these people, let's face it, their biggest wish on the planet is to become white. And this is why there's so much anti-European hatred in MAGA. You got to understand, there's a lot of Latinx and Indians who basically understand at some level that they can never attain what I, a relatively grody and lazy Eastern European, have by birth. I never deserved being white. It's not very special. There's a lot of white people out there, but they want it so bad that they have a sort of murderous resentment towards me and other Eastern Europeans. And this also explains why they are so much pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine, because it is Russia that's killing white people by the thousands right now as we speak in Ukraine. So there is that. Well, I hope this enlightens you a little bit. It does include a lot of racialist thinking, which I'm sure you're not really used to, but get ready for that, because the way I see it, every major blind spot of liberalism is related to this lack of racialist thinking and this understanding that the masses of the world, well, they're not like you, and they will never be like you. And I know why you want them to be like you, but that's just not going to happen. Bye-bye, folks, and take care.